Darren and I are here at our favorite place in the whole world to vlog, Swallow Falls State Park. We're gonna show you how we take waterfall pictures with a DSLR. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. We got 2 cameras today. Darren's carrying the other one. Hey Darren, show him your camera.
It feels like I can't hold on.
It's actually taking us longer than expected to get to the falls because we've been wandering around looking at all these trees. Mostly it's a mixture of like green, orange, and yellow. It's really misty right now. We're trying our best to get to the waterfall. This is so crazy. Okay, so once you finally got to your waterfall location and you want to take this epic shot of the waterfall, you'll need to make sure that you have the settings on your camera set for long exposure. So in order to do that, you need to put your camera in manual mode. Once your camera's in manual mode, then you need to adjust the exposure triangle so that you can get your shot. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna wanna do is drop our ISO on our camera all the way down to as low as possible. Then we're going to reduce the aperture also. We're gonna open our shutter all the way up until the picture's properly exposed. At this point, we're just gonna tap to take the picture. And there we have our waterfall picture. Thank you, Darren, for holding the umbrella. Whew, sorry if my audio was peaking during that. It's really noisy back there and I had to elevate my voice. Yeah, what a day. Let's do a tutorial vlog in the rain. All right, so let's get back to the house. Hey guys, okay, so now that we're back here at the house, I wanted to show you what I do in Adobe Lightroom with my raw images that I took from my DSLR in order to make them look really good. Typically when I'm out shooting photography, I like to shoot in a raw file format. Raw file formats give you much more tonality. They give you much more range of color, more than like what a computer monitor displays. You're essentially sampling a digital negative from the environment where you're taking that picture. So you're getting like billions of colors instead of millions. It's the easiest way I can explain it. Shoot your camera in RAW, bring it back home, use a program like Lightroom that is able to take that raw data and allow you to move it around in your post-production phase. You will have much more ability to really work with that image and clean it up. And it also helps you, like for example, if you happen to overexpose or underexpose an image, you'll be able to fix that later in your post-production step. So one of the first things that I like to do is I import my photos into Lightroom. I've already done that. These were the 6 or 7 pictures that I shot when Darren and I walked through the park. The first thing I will look at is my exposure. Up here up in the top right, you can see that this image is pretty much exposed. We can actually bring it down a little bit. But I will show you one of the areas of this image that's overexposed is the falls itself. Now this again was a 1 second picture. It was a pretty long exposure because we were trying to get that water moving, that soft water look that when you're taking a waterfall picture that you're always going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the exposure just slightly dropped it, and then I'm going to go down here to the highlights. Now this is where the magic starts. So what you can do is you can drop these highlights back and watch what happens to this waterfall. You see how we're starting to see more detail in those highlights? This is something that you can just not get from a JPEG image. If this had been shot in JPEG, we'd be done. All you'd see is white. There'd be no recovering that. It's important to shoot in RAW. So I pulled those highlights down just slightly. As far as the shadows go, so I'm looking around this image and I don't really see a problem with the shadows. And as well as you can see how this curve here, if there had been problems with the shadows, you would see like a straight up line right here. This is called a histogram. Not to get into too much detail about histograms, but there's really no problems with the shadows in this image per se. So one of the things I like to do is I like to drop my blacks just a little bit. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is contrast. So contrast is kind of a personal preference. It depends really on your style as a photographer. You can drop the contrast and you kind of get this like washed out look. And depending on what you're doing, like if you're taking portraits, sometimes people like to reduce the contrast a little bit. Whenever you're taking landscape, I tend to kind of like to pump up the contrast a little bit. And you can see it really gives this like a darker, like cooler feel. This happened to be shot in the rain, so I happen to like just to bring that contrast up, maybe around plus 30. I think that gives it sort of a cool rainy look. It was cold that day. So anyways, moving right along, the next thing I like to look at is the color temperature. So typically a rule of thumb to go by is if you shot something in the winter, you want more of a cooler temperature in your images. This is the white balance. And if you shot something in the summertime, you want more of a warmer feel. Now, for this particular image, since we're in the fall, we're kind of in the midst of that summer-winter thing, it really go either way. Like if you push it towards the cool, you see it, you kind of get more of a blue watery feel. But if you bring it up a little bit, you'll see that we get more of just a slightly warmer feel, which is kind of what I want to go for within this particular image. Then we have our tints, either green or magenta. I tend not to mess around with that too much unless I'm shooting something at the beach. And I apologize for this. It looks like my vibrance was already set. But so one of the things is vibrance and saturation will help pop out your colors a little bit more. Tend to almost always increase my vibrance just a little bit. Saturation, I will warn you, saturation, using too much saturation, you tend to blow out your colors or you shift your colors a little bit. So I tend to not do so much saturation. Vibrance is what you want to do. Okay, so next on the list of things I like to do is a lot of times I like to look in the sort of the dark areas of an image by clicking the zoom. And I will go in and if I see any grain is like static or noise in the image, I will increase the noise reduction. I just, for this image, I'm not really seeing anything, so I'm gonna leave that alone. And so then I just take sort of a look at the image. Now, one of the things that I feel is this was shot with a wide angle lens, and I feel like we're really far from our subject. Now, our subject is the waterfall. So I want to move into our subject just a little bit. So what I will do is I will go over here and click this crop, and then I'll hold my shift key. That way it preserves my size of my picture a little bit, my aspect ratio, and I will bring this in just a little bit to kind of get us a little bit closer into our waterfall. And I'm going to recenter and hit enter. So I think we're just bringing this in just a little bit to our waterfall. I think that looks a little bit better. So then I'm noticing this area right here. So this area looks a little dull to me, like a little dark. And I feel like, and that's okay, but I feel like as far as the other parts of the image, there's more light. So one of the things that I like to do, and it's really a cool feature within Lightroom, is a radial gradient. So I'll click this here. In about the middle of that area, I will click and drag, and it draws this circle. Once I get the circle about where I want it, let go. And then it will let me work with the exposure, contrast, highlights for just that particular part of the image. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just try to increase the exposure slightly. You can see it's coming up. And then I'm noticing that That contrast look that I have is just a little bit off now, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring the contrast up for that as well to kind of get it to jive with the rest of the image. So there, I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. So another place we might try one of these radial filters is on the waterfall itself. So right about the middle of the waterfall, I'm gonna draw a little oval. And then this thing actually allows me to tilt it slightly. And you can adjust it here and there. For this one, I'm gonna reset these to 0. I'm gonna try dropping the exposure. I'm gonna say that's not really working because I'm starting to see like kind of like a weirdness around here. I'm not gonna mess with the exposure, but I am gonna bring the highlights down for just the waterfall. Just a little bit, like that. I'm gonna hit enter to commit that change. So I think this is looking pretty good. You can always go back after you've done your like little tweaks. Minimalism is key. You never want to push an image too far. It may make it look sort of surreal and fake. Too much high dynamic range tends to give a weird look, especially if you have people in your images, their skin tones get all blown out and whatnot. But I think this is actually looking pretty good. So I don't want to do just maybe 1 or 2 more images with you. Here's one where Darren was running. I think it's pretty cool. Now, one cool thing about Lightroom is you actually just hit auto and it will kind of try to expose the image. It always drops the contrast, and I'm not a fan of like the lower contrast. I'm gonna pump the contrast a little bit. Actually, I don't think that looks too bad. Definitely a little bit dark off on the edges. So we could try to lighten this area up with a radial filter by bringing up the exposure a little bit over there. Same goes for this area here. Drop the contrast for that just a little bit. I feel like that kind of gives that image just a little bit more balance, for example. So that one's done. Then I'm going to go here to this root picture. I'm also just going to go ahead and try to hit that auto setting and just see where it gets us. And then bring up my contrast. And kind of check around and see if there's any noise. I don't see any noise. I think I'm going to bring up the contrast just a little bit more. And then just bring up play with my exposure a little bit. I think that looks pretty good, guys. I'll just play around with this up here just a little bit. The area looks a little dark to me. Same goes with this area here. And overall, I might just bring my exposure down just a little. Well, I think that looks pretty good. Alright, here's one more. I'm going to hit the auto just to kind of see where that brings me. Bring up my contrast. I really like this particular shot. I think it looks really great. I like how it sort of brings your eye into the middle of that root. You have some of the green from the hemlocks, and then you have the leaves that have fallen, which are kind of like in the orange, and it kind of contrasts that a little bit. So anyways, just wanted to kind of touch on what I do in my post-production to kind of make images stand out. This is by no means a full comprehensive how-to for Adobe Lightroom, but I just want to kind of show you like this is an important step in your photography if you want to take great pictures. So anyways, I hope this helped you, and I don't know, I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.